Hello there, Green Knight here. Welcome to this Vassal Armada tutorial. By now you should be interested in learning how to actually play a game. We have learned to set up, how to maneuver the interface, how to create and save setup files. So here we are. We have you and your opponent. You have both assembled and deployed your fleets. You have toggled the setup area using the setup area toggle, and you're about ready to start. And in this case, we have two fleets with 400 points each. Constantine versus Leia. So one player would then usually call hit or miss, and one blue die would be rolled. So Constantine calls hit. Okay, so he gets to decide, and he decides to be second player. And then it goes like this. He drags his objectives over to the table, and he uses Control F. I guess that's a hotkey you learn pretty fast. And because it's so small, you either have to zoom in or you could mouse over. Pretty neat, huh? And Leia, knowing how bad some of these are, decides on Iron Storm, which is an objective where the second player places all the obstacles. So kind of drag this over here. And for the benefit of people coming into the game and wondering who is first player, you can just put the initiative token next to the first player, and the second player can have the objective close to him. And Iron Storm doesn't use any of the special obstacles, and doesn't even use the station. So you can just Control Delete, Control D. And since the second player sets up everything, he would just, sort of drag them out across the table. In this case, he could probably want to put them rather close together because he has to grab shift reroute, and that is before deploying fleets. I'm not gonna lecture you about what the different objectives do, but just click and drag them over. And normally it goes between second and first player, but this objective is special. So one thing you could do to signal that you are done is to hit the report set or control enter button. I think I have turned that up and volume mixer. Yeah, because normally there's a little sound there to just sort of wake up your opponent. Or you could use the hotkey. That will provide the same effect. You could also, actually talk to your opponent. The entire game can be played out using the chat, but you could also, since you're already a member of Star Wars Armada, use one of the voice channels here and talk to your opponent. Or you could use Facebook voice or video chat, whatever. It usually speeds up play and makes it more enjoyable. But actually, many players like playing with just the chat, and that's okay. It's maybe a little bit slower, but if you have two people who are used to playing both Armada and are used to the module, it's surprisingly fast because most things do not really need an explanation, and almost everything you do will get reported into the chat. So if I hit set here, if I can change the size of this window a little, if I change the speed of my ISD, if I take hull damage, if I regain hull, whatever, it's all reported into here. Okay. So and the same applies to dice. If I roll the 4 red, 4 blue out of the front of my ISD 2, it gets reported there, and it's of course visible in this dice window, but everything interesting goes into the reporting window. So you have a full log there, and it's very easy to follow. So you can very easily play entire games and almost type very little. You could type what kind of defense token you're targeting with your accuracies, but even that doesn't always require an explanation. If you're shooting at Shara and you get a single accuracy and 3 hits, the opponent will know that you're targeting the scatter. Okay, so like I've mentioned before, everything has a right-click menu. So if this was, say, dangerous territory, you could mark all the obstacles and you could spawn an objective token on top of them. Or you could just drag and copy and drag the objectives tokens from the side here or from the pieces menu, but that is more time consuming. Here you can find mines and the pass token, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So no one gets any pass tokens. So after obstacles and all that, you would get effects like the grab. See, I right click and spawn the token, and then I would place it here so I could reach all the obstacles, couldn't I? Yeah. And then we would proceed to set up fleets. And then you sort of drag it into here and you can spin it around using orientation. So all the way you will want to use the right click button, right click menu to sort of learn the key shortcuts. So here you have one that's Alt Control Shift Down, reorient ships. That's actually the ship taking many small turns, so it takes a little bit to execute. And then you can arrow left, arrow right, or hold down Control for even faster rotation. And now you have probably noticed before, that defense tokens are sort of glued to the base here, so there's no need to have them on the ship card. They're easily visible, especially if you mouse over. And you also have the hull value. You do pull damage cards, but instead of constantly looking at your opponent's ships or your own and sort of counting damage cards, we are just tracking damage under stats here. Lose hull. Gain hull. That's also hotkeys you will learn very quickly. And here you can see in the log what has happened. And the yellow number is speed, so you will want to use Control up or down to set your initial speed. And of course, this continues until every ship and squadron has deployed. This is nothing special to the module. I'm just gonna not spend a lot of time doing that now because it's ultimately not that important. But you will notice that when I spawn this list, it spawned only one copy of my generic squadron, so I need to clone those X-Wings a bit. And I'm going to just deploy them in a very stupid manner here. And all the while you can always zoom in, remember that? That's 4, and I'm missing one more X-Wing. Yeah. So you can zoom in on you. Well, let's assume they all have speed. And these guys also need speed. 2 speed. Yeah. And this is turn 0, the setup turn. So when everyone is done setting up, and after deploying ships would be the grab thingy. And how much was it? It's been so long since I played it. The distance 1 to 3, or is it distance 1 to 2? Distance 2, yes. So then I would want to cause trouble maybe by moving these obstacles a bit, just to be an ass. And now you notice that I'm not using a range ruler. I am using these overlays, which are like speed up, down, hull, shield changes. Uh, Distance bands is shift space. You're going to be using that a lot. It's the same for ships. It's the same for squadrons. Ships and many other components also have control space, which brings up firing arcs. And you can guess, yes, black is black, blue is blue, red is red, shows the range, and you have the arc lines there. And if you think it looks funny, it's because attack range is measured from within arc. So to measure your side arc ISD, you have to measure from here. You don't measure from here, but you can measure your front arc shots from here. So that's why there's a little bump there. But for the Nebulon, that is not the same because the Nebulon has a perfect corner to its arcs. So there is no offset there. If you get an awful lot of stuff going on, you can hit the remove tool button to clear things up. Okay. Now I'm gonna remove these objective tokens. That was a stupid example. So I'm cleaning those away. After setup, please remove the setup area. Don't want to fly with crutches. So with setup done, you hit the plus button here and you go to round 1. And decks were shuffled, updated to round 1. Okay. And now we have to assume that you know what you're doing, that you are not completely unfamiliar with the rules of Armada. That's a separate issue. So we have to assume that you know that the next is the command phase, and this is where you set your commands. And each ship has an associated command stack, just like they would on the tabletop. So to look at your commands, you would first mask your stack. Now you can see what commands you have, but your opponent and any spectators can't. When it's red like this, only you can see the commands. And then you simply set the dials. You want to navigate, you want repair, and then you want to go concentrate fire, for example. And then you can use the hotkeys to do similar things for your other. And note that everything is reported here, so there is no cheating with commands. Just setting some random commands. So when you're done, you can just mark everything or use control click to mark everything and then go back to normal. You can, of course, play like this all the time because you are free to see what your commands are, but most people get rather confused doing that. So people usually play like this. And the other player would do the same and set a bunch of commands. I'm just setting navigate here. And then with this out of the way, it's ready for the ship phase. And the first player would start activating a ship and followed by the second player. And they would play through the game in a normal fashion. So what is interesting here is that when you're ready to activate the ship, you do this, you reveal command. So this is Yavaris. I don't know, I haven't really specified which is Yavaris. You want to use Control N. So that this one is Yavaris. And then you resolve squadron commands, engineering, same as usual. And if anything is in range, you can bring up the range overlay. So let's pretend this one was here. This is somewhat later in the game. Then you can use the line of sight tool to indicate that you're shooting front to front. And then you would bring up the dice roller. And you have only 3 red. And it's a good roll. And the other guy, he would spend his brace and his redirect. And you can see this is reported in the in the chat here. And he would then take 2 damage on his right shield or left shield or whatever. And then you could use the line of sight tool again to indicate you're shooting at the front. Wait, and you clear that dice and you roll 1, and you roll 1. And then you can say you cannot use this or that token. You can write that no redirect, for example. And then it just takes another damage on the front here, either using stats, shield values, loose front shield, or using the hotkeys. That's another hotkey, key 1, 2. So after squadrons and engineering and shooting comes movement, right? And that requires a bit of explanation. You select your ship that you want to move, and then you could remove the tool manually here, or you could just place the right movement template. And then it will automatically be cleared because of the 2-tool rule. You're not allowed to sort of measure while you are measuring with something else. Now, this is a hotkey that you probably want. Place left and place right. Control Shift right, Control Shift left. And you might as well learn those rather quickly so that you can switch quickly between the sides here without fiddling too much. Now, to manipulate the maneuver tool, you just have to select the segment that you want, and with Control pressed, you could use right and left arrow, and you can also cannot use this menu for this. You have to sort of know the hotkeys for this. So hold down Control and use the arrow keys to manipulate it. And then when you are done, you can do what we call notch the tool. And this is accomplished by just selecting the corresponding notch here. When you place it, this is basically you playing around with the tool and deciding where to go. But once you're determined to go somewhere, you notch the left movement template. And then you get this little message here that Yavaris, the ship, notched the maneuver tool. That is a signal that the course is set. And this is the same that happens when you slot the maneuver tool into your ship's base. You can't take back this then, so you have to go through with it. Movement always follows a step-by-step procedure. So using the left-hand template, since you placed left, you move from knuckle to knuckle. So this is speed 1. And this is speed 2. So, but you cannot, if we undo here, you cannot skip, you cannot skip directly here. That's just bull. Now this seems a little bit tedious, but you were already hanging around the control button, right? Because that's used when you place a notch and manipulate the segments. So basically to move on the left, you press down Control and then not too quickly press 1 and then 2. And then you don't have to use the menu at all. If we undo now and then we do what we would have done had the tool been on the right side, Alt 1, Alt 2, then you see that's just messed up. So you have to undo. So always use Control when the maneuver tool is notched on the left, and always hold on Alt when it's on the right, and that's relative to the ship. So this is to the left of the ship, not to the right. This is perhaps the most confusing part of the entire thing, but you will get the hang of it in no time. So there is also a tool here to straighten the tool, and of course to remove it. So let's go through it again. First, I push Control Shift right to deploy the tool to the right, or Control Shift left to deploy the tool to the right, to the left, sorry. And then I select this segment and I go 1, 2, holding down Control. I manipulate it using the arrow keys right and left. And let's say this guy, he had a maneuver. So normally his yaw is 1-1, but I added a yaw here. And maybe you want to explain what you're doing in the chat, but it should be obvious to any experienced player that this is a legal move because you're spending your dial to add a yaw. And then Control Shift Alt left notches the tool and Control 1, Control 2 moves along the tool. And then as a courtesy, you can straighten tool, remove tool, and you could even report set to sort of tell that you're done. And when you are report set after moving here, you would typically have signaled the end of your ship's activation, unless, for instance, when you activated, you reported the use of Flight Commander, so that your opponent would know that you're going to command squadrons after you activate. There's a little bit of delay here on the reports. That's unusual. Maybe there's some lag with the server. The game servers are generally rather stable, but from time to time people get kicked and have to log back in or something like that, but it's usually nothing major. And the game proceeds like this through the ship phase. All the ships activate and do normal Armada thingies, follow the activation orders, spend their pass tokens, they shoot, they repair, command squadrons, whatever, and then the squadron phase happens and you follow all the normal rules and the squadrons move and they shoot if they're rogue, or just shoot them not to move, or just move if they are not rogue, and all of that. And then when you get to the status phase, this is where usually the second player, that's the standard, because it's usually, well, it's good to not to have both players press the turn button at the same time, because then you advance 2 turns. So usually it's the second player's job to, once both players agree that it's round, then you hit the button. And what happens there is that you will have, all the ships will have revealed their command, right? And once you hit, and they will have spent some defense tokens, right? And that sort of thing, and squadrons will have activated. But once you hit the status phase button there, then you can see that the command stacks get cycled. So what was the bottom command of these Nebulons and the Pelta is now the top one, and the bottom one is colored red to remind you that you have no command, so you have to set a command here, and you can use the right click menu as usual. And this is typically a time when things can get messed up. You sort of set the top dial, and of course this gets reported and it looks weird, so then you quickly undo or explain to your opponent, sorry, I set the wrong command, I have to undo, and then you can undo it. So, and you can see the initiative marker has changed colors. Of course, all these should also be activated, and all the defense token refreshed and so forth. So it's a bit of automation to speed up play. It is my claim that if you have 2 skilled players that are used to Vassal and both are interested in playing quickly, then it's actually faster than playing on the tabletop. I'm not sure everyone agrees with me there, but usually what happens is, once the game gets intense or happens to come to a point where decisions really matter, players tend to overthink it. They oh, should I do this? Should I do that? And there is an endless amount of measuring, and there's fiddling with the maneuver tool, and things slow down a great bit. But if both players are committed to a quick, fun game, it's possible to do it even faster than the real thing. So I think that was enough for the basic example. Oh, I can show the damage deck. What's usually done is, let's see this dictator here. It's taken a bunch of damage on the front, and then it starts taking hull damage. So it takes one hull damage, and then usually you will take one damage card and put it next to it, and then Gold Squadron shoots, and wow, it scores a hit and a crit. So 2 more damage, and of course, then there are more cards, and you flip up the damage card and the other damage, and then you take those cards as you would on the tabletop and stick them next to your ship. That's the correct way of doing it. And you have the critical here. But you have also tracked on the base here that you are down to 6 hull, and that makes it very easy to see, because large ships, especially the ISDOs, you have a pile of damage cards here. You don't want to recount them all the time. Yeah. So it's a bit of a convenience tweak there. And same with the speed number. It's better to have it on the ship than have a separate dial that you have to move after the ship. That's just that works on the tabletop, but in a digital format, why? You can also, if you need to see the line of sight dots or targeting points or whatever, you can Control F or fade the ship, and then you can, yeah, the ISD is a good example. Yeah, now we can see them. Most of the time you can see this shot is legal, this shot is not legal, but sometimes you have to measure, especially when checking for obstruction or that sort of thing. So that was the damage cards. When you repair something, you can just choose send to discard pile, and then you can use the Alt H to regain hull, for example. And yeah, when you repair shields, you can repair shields like that. So I think that's all we have to say about that. Yeah, cards that exhaust. This one doesn't exhaust, but you can exhaust all the cards. You just use the right-click menu or the hotkey. The exhaust key is the right arrow, or you can unexhaust. But cards that exhaust will also refresh on turn refresh, right? Except those new non-recurring upgrades, they don't refresh unless you spend a token. You can also sort of report that you've used the card. I'm using Flight Commander rather than say that. You can just right-click and report used. Flight Commander was used. There's a little bit of lag here. And I guess there is a lot of other subtle functionality, like you have these command tokens. You can also stick those to the base, and there is a number of slots equal to your command value. So the dictator can have up to 2 tokens at the same time, for example. And you have menus for raid tokens, chaff tokens, focus tokens, that sort of thing. And of course, manipulating defense tokens, exhaust or discard, refreshing is automatic. Yeah. I think that if you watch through all these videos now, you should have all that you need to actually sit down and play a game against an opponent. But I would recommend that you start by playing a little bit with yourselves. Just set up a fleet and practice some of the commands, especially moving the ship and bringing up the range distance templates, maybe activating a few squadrons, that sort of thing. So good luck.